We are going to build a generative AI project called SEO Keyword Generator using React, Firebase, and AI model. Before we get into code, let's look at the live demo for this project. And at the end, you can turn this project as a SaaS product. We are going to use Firebase for authentication and Firestore from Firebase to save the generated keyword. So first step is that unless you sign in before using this project, and you can sign in using your Google account. And it says that I should enter my Cohere API key, and we are going to use this model called Cohere. And one cool thing about this model called Cohere is that they offer some free plan that we can test it. To get your API key, I'm going to click here as go to dashboard, and then this is my API key. I'm going to copy that and I'll show you how to do this one also. I'm going to enter my API key and then save. After saving, I can now go ahead and generate the keywords. I'm going to say keywords for HTML and then generate. And indeed, I have the generated keywords, and this is a history. Even if I reload the history of my generated content, and I can go ahead and clear the history and I can log out. So this is what we are going to build. To get started, let's go ahead and create our first React application, and we are going to use Vite. So if you search for Vite, this is the official website, and then click on the get started. And this is a command for creating the React application. I'm going to open my terminal, or you can use the built-in terminal that came with Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to navigate into my desktop and then paste it and then hit enter. And enter again. I'm going to name it as Gen AI Keyword Generator and choose React, JavaScript, and cd into the Gen AI Keyword Generator, and then use npm-i to install all the packages. Alright, it is done. Let me open using my preferred code editor, and that is Visual Studio Code. So we are going to use Tailwind CSS for styling. So let's search for Tailwind CSS and click on Get Started. Framework Guides, select Vite, and we are done with the first step. Second step is to copy this code or snippet, and let me open the terminal and then paste and hit enter. The next step is copy this code and place it in the tailwind.config.js. Let's wait while it is installing. Alright, it is done. So open the file and let me replace with this. And the next step is copy the index.css, navigate into the SRC and index.css. Let me copy this code. Let's navigate into the app.js and replace with everything. And let me run the application as npm run dev. Alright, let me preview that, and we have hello world. And let me change this one to text-red and use 100 to confirm that it has been installed. Let me increase to 500. I just want to confirm that Tailwind CSS has been installed, and indeed it has been installed. And let's install these packages as npm-i Axios to make the HTTP request, react-router-dom, and react-icons. And let's search for Firebase npm and copy that. So let me enter, or let me type as Firebase and hit enter. Alright, it is done. The next step is we are going to configure our application using Firebase. Let's get into Google and search for Firebase, or better still, you can go to firebase.google.com, and I'm going to sign in using this account. The next step is go to console, and it says that welcome to Firebase. The next step is to create a new project, so click on that, and let's give the name of our project as MachineLearning AI SEO, and this name will be visible when a user is logging in. Click on accept and then confirm and then continue. Uncheck enable Google Analytics for this project and then create project. Alright, it is done, so click on continue. We can integrate Firebase into different platforms, but we are going to use the web. So click on this one and let's provide a nickname for this project. And this name will not be visible to the end user. It is going to be used internally. So you can provide any name as Gen AI and then click on register app. And it says that we should install Firebase, and we have done that. And all what we need is to copy this code. Copy that and then continue to console. And that's all what we need. So let's get back to the code, and we're going to have one file for the Firebase configurations. So in the SRC here, I'm going to have one file called firebase.js and then paste the code. And let's do some housekeeping, remove these comments, and then this one also. Let me explain the initialize app. This is going to be used to connect Firebase into application so that we can use other services like authentication, hosting, Firestore, and so much more. So after that, we will need get off for authentication. So import, and we're going to destructure from Firestore is supposed to be Firebase/off. And Firebase provides a lot of services, for example, authentication, analytics, and so much more, as you can see here. But what we want is the authentication, and that is the off. And then in here, what I want is called get off. And get off is used for authentication. And after that, we will need what is called the Firestore for the actual database. So /Firestore. And what I want here is called get Firestore, which is this. And below here, we need to export these methods. So I'm going to say that export const, and then I'm going to use off for authentication and use get off and pass in the app instance. Likewise, the DB, and that is our database. We're going to use get Firestore and then pass in the app. And that is it. Now that we have configured our application to use Firebase, it is time for us to implement the authentication. We are going to have a component for the login in. So in the SRC, I'm going to have one folder called pages. And the first component is login.jsx. If you are using Vite, make sure that your extension ends with JSX. And let me scaffold the React component. I'm not sure I have the extension for that, so let's search for React Redux. And this is the extension for scaffolding React component. Alright, so I can now use RAFCE, or let me use the FC. Alright, so the next step is that we need to mount this component. This is where React Router DOM for navigation comes in. So in the app.js, we are going to import the following, and that is React Router DOM. What I want is called browser router, and let me rename as router, and then route, and then the route. Let me show you how we're going to use these ones. So I'm going to remove everything from here and going to wrap application using the router. And the next step is bring in the route, and then in between you're going to pass in the individual route. So here as route, and you're going to pass in the component path. This is going to be a home page. At the moment you don't have the home page yet, so let me use login for this one. And the component to render, I'm going to use element and then pass in the login in component as that. So now if I visit /login, well, my server is not running. So let me rerun as npm run dev and then reload, and I have the login as that. For this project, we are going to ignore the styling. We are going to focus on the main logic. At the end, the final code will be provided and you can style it the way you want it. So back to the component here. For this project, we are going to log in using Google. So up here, and that is the login in, we may need the following. The first one is from React Router DOM, and what I want is called use navigate, and I'm going to use this hook to redirect the user to a certain path, and then link for navigation. After that, we may need the auth from our Firebase configuration from the firebase.js, in this case this one for the authentication. And then after the auth, we may need a couple of icons from React icons. So if you search for React icons, not this one but instead this one, you can use any of these icons of your choice. So back here, I'm going to import from React icons /font awesome, and what I want is called FA Google and then FA Rocket, and you may need these icons from BS, and what I want is called BS Rocket and then BS Shield and then BS Speedometer. You can find these icons from the official documentation. And the last icon is from MD, and what I want is MD outline privacy tip. So let's get into the main component. We're gonna have instance of the navigate, and that is a use navigate, as navigate is equal to use navigate. Let's have a function for Google sign in, and it goes like this: const sign in is equal to async, and then the first step is to get the provider, which is equal to Google auth provider. So let's import Google auth provider from Firebase, and that is /auth. So after that, we may need what is called the sign in with pop-up. So let's import sign in with pop-up. Nice. So here it is equal to new instance of Google provider, and bring try and catch block. In the try, we are going to await sign in with pop-up, and then pass in two things. The first one is equal to the auth that we have configured in the Firebase as auth, and the second argument is equal to the provider, and that is the instance of Google auth provider. And below here, we know that the user has been logged in, therefore we can navigate the user to the dashboard using navigate and then /dashboard. And in case something goes wrong, let's just log the error here. So let's have a simple navigation. Let me use a fragment, and then nav. I'm going to provide link component, and for the link I'm going to provide to, and it should go to the home page. I'm going to provide a span, and for the span I'm going to say back to home, and then the other span is equal to back. Alright, so let's see the preview, and there you go, and it worked. Once again, the styling will be provided. Let's focus on the main logic. So we are going to have a button where we are going to apply the function, and that is sign in. When a user click on the button and that is on click, we're gonna call the sign in, and I'm gonna say continue with Google. And let's use the icon. So in between here, I'm gonna use the FA Google, and let's see the differences now. And here we go. If I click on that, as you can see, the pop-up window works. But let me check the console. Something went wrong, and it says that Firebase error of configuration not found. This means that we have to enable the sign in with Google in our dashboard. So let's get into application and click on the project overview, and then we are going to locate the authentication. Click on that and click on get started, and we have these providers. For example, authenticate using email or password, Google, Facebook, phone, and others. But what we want is Google, and then enable and select your email and then save. Alright, so now let's try out. If I reload and then click on that, and I'm gonna log in using this account, and indeed I have been redirected, which means that the login in is working. If I check our DB, and that is users, we're gonna see the login users, which are these accounts. Now that the main logic is working, I'm going to provide you with a complete code with the styling, and definitely the final source code will be provided. So if I visit login, this is the login in component. The next step is going to be the home page. So in the pages here, I'm going to name it as landing page or just landing, and then RAFCE as landing, and then back to the app.js. I'm going to have one route that point to / and the component is equal to landing, and then if I go to the home page, I have it as that. And I'm going to provide you with the complete code for the landing page, and this is what we have. The next step is going to be the dashboard. This is where the main logic begins, and we are going to use Cohere API. So if you search for Cohere documentation, or better still, you can go to docs.cohere.com. If you don't have an account, let's go ahead and create one, and I'm gonna log in using my Google account. And for the first name, I'm gonna use Masync, and then coding school, and continue. And then the role, I'm gonna select software engineer, and then continue. And I'm gonna use the text generation and sometimes moderation, semantic. Select everything here and then submit. And then click on the API keys, and they have given us try API key, which is this. And to toggle it, click on the eye icon, and this is the key. The next step is to get the actual endpoint. So let's get into the dashboard, or let's click on the documentation. And what we want is the chat, and they have this endpoint: chat, re-rank, embed jobs. So click on the chat, and this is what we want. So let's look at the endpoint. I'm going to select TypeScript or Cohere, and this is the endpoint that we want, which is /chat. So I'm going to copy this, and then back to our project, we are going to have one component called dashboard, and then I'm going to paste the endpoint. Let's scaffold this component, and then back to the app.js, going to use the dashboard and then /dashboard. In the dashboard, we may need the following state. So let's bring in use state from React, and the first state is going to be topic, and that is the topic that you want to generate the SEO keywords, and then set topic, and by default it is empty string. The next one is equal to the keywords, and then set keywords, and for this is equal to array, and then loading, and set loading is equal to false, and after that we're gonna have saved keyword and set save keywords. It is also an array, and also for the user authentication as user and set user, it is empty string, and then instance of use navigate as navigate is equal to use navigate, and the auto import is fine from React router DOM. And then let's also have this state for the API key as is API key modal open, and then set API key modal open. By default it is false. We are going to have a component called API key modal, and this modal is going to allow the user to enter his or her API key. So to continue, let's have some dummy component for that, and inside I'm gonna have API key modal.jsx, and then let me scaffold as that. So back to the dashboard, we are going to import API key modal. We are going to open this modal based on condition, and that is if the user hasn't provided any API key. The next step is that let's get the actual API key from the local storage. Therefore, we will need a state for that. I'm going to call this one as API key and then set API key. And to get it, we are going to pull it from the local storage. And to do that, I'm going to pass in what is called local storage.getItem. And the placeholder is equal to Cohere API key. And we're going to use this placeholder when setting the API key. In case you don't have any key in the local storage, then we're going to use empty string for that. Next step is let's check the user auth status. And that is, you want to make sure that a user is logged in. Otherwise, we are going to redirect. This is where the auth from Firebase comes in, which is this one. We can get the login user from the auth here. So back to the dashboard, I'm going to import the auth configuration. And then below here, I'm going to use effect. And use effect is a hook that's going to be called as soon as the component mounted. And I'm going to pass in these dependencies, and that is navigate. This means when the navigate changes, you also want to re-render the component. So how can we get the current user? And we can get it from the auth. We have a method called onAuthStateChanged, which is this one. We're going to pass in a callback function. We have access to the login user as the current user. And I'm going to return this condition as if there is no current user, then we are going to navigate the user to /login. Else, we are going to update the user by using what is called setUser. So here as setUser, and I'm going to pass in the current user. Let's do some cleanup by returning this callback function as unsubscribe. Let me assign what is called unsubscribe to this one. So here we can unsubscribe as a function. And the next step is that we are going to get the saved keywords from the DB. This means that as soon as the application loaded, we are going to pull or fetch all the keywords that has been saved into Firestore. This is where use effect comes in. So here, bring in use effect, and as before, we're going to pass in the callback function and then these dependencies. For this, we're going to pass in the user. This means as soon as the user state changes, we also want to re-render this component by pulling all the saved keywords from the database. And it goes like this. But first, let's check if the user is not logged in. Then we are going to return. This means don't move on to the next logic. How can we get a data from Firestore? At the moment, we haven't saved anything into Firestore, so the question is, how can we get it? And since we know the collection name from Firestore, we can retrieve it. So here it goes like this. Const queue, and that is query, is equal to query from Firestore. And the auto import is fine, which is this one. Query from Firebase /Firestore. And we use this one to get data from the Firestore, and that is querying. For this function, I'm going to pass in what is called the collection. And the collection is also from the Firestore. And the collection is going to hold our data. For example, let's say we are building a blogging platform. We're going to have one collection that's going to store or save all the posts, users, and comments. The collection is like a cabinet or a box where we have individual data. So in here, we're going to pass in the collection and call it as a function. Then pass in the DB instance, the one that we have configured from Firebase, which is on this file. In this case, DB here, we have to pass in the DB as well. This is from Firebase configuration. Then comma, the collection name that we want to save all the keywords. We are going to use keywords here. This means upon saving, we're going to use the same collection name as keyword. And then bring comma and then order by. This one is also from Firestore as order by, and then we're going to order by the timestamp. And that is the date that the collection was created. And then we want it to be in the descending order as descending order. So now we have the query. It is time for us to pull the query from the DB, and it goes like this. We're going to use what is called onSnapshot. And onSnapshot is an event listener that's going to be triggered anytime we have changes in the database. Then we're going to pass in the query and then a callback function. And in here, we have access to what is called snapshot. On the snapshot, this is where we have the actual document. Therefore, we can now update our state by using set save keywords. And we're going to pass in the following, and that is the actual data from the Firestore. Note that we have the save keywords here as a state. We are going to pass in the data from the Firestore as snapshot. On that, we have what is called document. And this is going to return all the keywords in the DB. But we want to show the keywords that belongs to the login user. This is where filtering comes in. So before saving, we're going to filter out. And it goes like this. I'm going to use .map because this is an array. And then I'm going to pass in a callback function, and I'm going to return. In the callback, we have access to the individual document. So in here, we are going to return the following, and that is ID, which is equal to document.id. And this is one caveat when using Firestore. Unless you manually pass in the ID, likewise the document. So here I'm going to spread all the doc. On that, we have what is called data, and this one contains the actual data from the Firestore. The next step is that we are going to filter out. So bring dot filter. And then for the filter, we're going to filter all the keywords that belongs to the login user. So it goes like this. As a callback function, we have access to the individual item. And then we're going to take item. On that, we have what is called user ID. If it is equal to the user.uid, and this user is in our state as that because we are updating the login user inside this use effect, which is set current user. And lastly, let's do some cleanup. And what comes back from the on snapshot, we have what is called unsubscribe. And now we can clean up by saying that return and then unsubscribe. Let's finish up with the API key modal. Before that, let's look at the finished one. In that way, you're going to have the clear picture. I'm going to open that one here and I'm going to log in. And if I click on this, this is the API key I was referring to. And this is what we are going to design. So in here, we're going to need the form to enter the API key. And then two buttons, one for saving and one is for the cancel. So back to the project here. For this API key modal, we are going to pass in the following props. I'm going to destructure it as is open because we are going to call this one on the dashboard. So here is open and then on close and then on save. And lastly, current key, and that is current API key. So let's have some internal state here as use state, and let's get the API key as API key, comma, set API key, which is equal to that. And let's get it from the local storage as local storage dot get item, and then the placeholder is Cohere API key. In case you don't have any API key, then use empty string. We're going to have one more state to show the API key as show API key and set show API key. And for this, we're going to use a Boolean value. By default, it is false. And that is, we want to show the API key in the form as this. Let's have the form for that. So I'm going to say that form, and then for the form, I'm going to have one input field. And the type here is going to be dynamic. It is either text or the password. So in here, we're going to have some condition here as this. If we have show API key, then we're going to use text. Otherwise, we're going to use password. Then after that, the value, we're going to use the API key in the state. And then on change, we're going to use the callback function and we're going to use the set API key. And we can get the event from the callback, and that is event.target.value. And let's have a placeholder. At the end, the final source code with the CSS will be provided. Let's focus on the main logic. So I'm going to say that enter your API key, and let's have a button. For the button name, we're going to use an icon. So in case we have show API key, then use this icon as import FAI/ from React icons /font awesome. And then I'm going to have FAI. So here, in case we have show API key, then we're going to use the FAI / else use FAI. And when the user click on this button, we are going to open the modal. Provide a type equal to button, and then on click, we are going to open the modal by using a callback function. And I'm going to say that set show API key, and I'm going to pass in if not show API key. The next part is going to be these buttons, one for cancel and one for save. I'm going to wrap it in a div. I'm going to have the first button, and that is for the cancel. The type here is equal to button, and when the user click on this, we are going to call the onClose. I'm going to pass this event upon calling this component. And then the next button is going to be the submit or save API key. And the type here is equal to submit. And remove this event listener. Let's have the function to submit. So in here, I'm going to say handle submit. And it goes like this: const handle submit is equal to event, and then let's prevent the default as prevent default. If you don't have any API key, and that is API key.trim, let me use the exclamation mark, then we know that the user hasn't provided any API key. Therefore, we are going to alert by saying that please enter your API key. And then I'm going to return. Below here, we know that the user has the API key. Therefore, we're going to call the onSave and then pass in the API key to be saved into local storage. And lastly, onClose. We are going to call this function in the dashboard, and I'll show you how we are going to save the API key. And below here, if is open, and that is if it is not open, then return null. So let's bind, which is this, remove this one and use onSubmit, and then pass in the handle submit. So let's get back to the dashboard and call this component, and we have already imported as API key modal, and we're going to call it in the dashboard here. So I'm going to use a fragment. Let me wrap it in a div, or you can use a fragment. And then below here, I'm going to call the API modal, and note that we are going to pass in the following, and that is open, onClose, onSave, and then current API key. The first one is equal to is open, and the value is equal to is API key modal open. The next is equal to the onClose, and for the onClose, we're going to use this function called set is API key modal open and pass in false. And then onSave. For the function for saving the API key, we don't have it yet, but let's provide a name called handle save API key, and we will get there very soon. And the next one is going to be the current API key, and for this one we can get it from the state. So let's go ahead and create this function. Let me collapse this, and I'm gonna say save API key into storage, and it goes like this: const handle save API key is equal to this, and I'm gonna use set API key, and for this function I'm gonna pass in the key that you want to save. Therefore, we're gonna pass the key into the set API key. And lastly, save it into local storage by using local storage dot set item, and the placeholder is equal to Cohere API key. the name of this one must be the same name when getting the API key. If you check in the or up here, which is this one, we are getting by using the Cohere API key as the variable or the placeholder, and then pass in the key that we want to save. Now that we have the API key modal, how are we going to trigger it to open? If you check it out here, we don't have the API key modal. The reason being that if you look at the prop here, it is called is open. And then if you check inside the API key modal, if it is not open, then we are going to return null. If I change this one to, let's say H1, and I'm going to say not opened. With this one, we have it as not opened. Instead of this, we are going to return null. So in the dashboard, we are going to trigger it manually. This means that its open API key in the state is false. If you check it out here, indeed it is false. If I change this one to true, let's see the modal, and here we go. And if I click on the icon here, as you can see, it is being toggling. It's because of this state, which is here. If it is open, show this icon, otherwise show this icon. So back to the dashboard, I'm going to change this one back to false. And we are going to open it based on a condition, and also we're going to provide some navbar here. If you look at the final one, when the user click on this key icon, it opens the modal. Now the next step is we are going to generate the keywords using the Cohere API. If you check out the API endpoint, which is this, and you can find out the endpoint in your dashboard as we have already explored. So back to the dashboard here, let me collapse this one. I'm going to have a comment as generate keywords. And it goes like this: const generate keywords. I'm going to use arrow function with async, and we're going to pass in the event. Let's prevent the default as prevent default. Let's have a very simple validation to make sure that a user is providing a topic that he or she wants the keywords from. And we are keeping track it in the state, and that is by using topic and then set topic. For example, any topic that you want to generate the keywords. So back here, we are going to make a condition that if there is no topic dot trim, then we are going to return. And also, in case we don't have any API key, then we are going to open the modal by allowing the user to enter the API key. So here as set is API key open to true. Then here we are going to return, and we're gonna set is loading to true, and this is where we are going to make the HTTP request by using the Cohere API. And if you check the official documentation and click on the API reference, what we want is the chat here and then chat. Let's look at the sample code by using this, and we will need the API endpoint, which is this one, and then the header is application/JSON, then the authorization. In the data, we have the model that we are going to use, and then the messages here. So I advise you to visit the official documentation because in future, the model name might change. So back here, we are going to use Axios. And let me confirm if we have already installed Axios in the package.json file. And indeed, we have the Axios here. So we are good to go. So I'm going to await Axios, and I believe I have the auto import, which is this one. Now on the Axios, we're going to use post method, and then we're going to pass in the endpoint. The endpoint is this one. So back here, paste that, and then bring comma, and then the object. We're going to specify the model, and the model here is called command R-08-2024. So let me confirm one more time, which is this one. This is the model by the time of watching this video. Then I'm going to pass in the message. This is where we are going to pass in our custom prompt. And the prompt goes like this: generate 10 SEO keys for the topic, and then return only the keywords separated by commas and without any additional text or explanation. There is a prompt that we are going to feed into this model, and you can modify this one to suit your need. And note that we are taking the topic from the form. Then after that, we're going to provide what is called temperature. So these are the configurations from the Cohere API. I'm going to use 0.3. After that, chart history, and that is underscore history. Use empty array, and then prompt truncation. Once again, you can find all these configurations in the official website. And then stream is false. Then connectors, I'm going to use array with object by providing ID, which is equal to web-search. And after that, we're going to provide the authentication, and that is headers, colon object, and then authorization. I'm going to use bearer, space, then the API key. Let me confirm. Yeah, we have the API key in the local storage, so you can use it here as $, curly braces, and then the API key. Then let's provide the content type. The content type here is going to be application/JSON. This is a response that we want back from the API. Let me assign to a variable as const response is equal to that. We're going to use this function in the form to generate. So let's have some simple form here. And for the form, provide on submit, and then the function as generate keywords. And let's provide input field with a type which is text, and then the value use topic, and then on change use callback function, and then set topic. Then the value can be found on the event.target.value. And then placeholder is equal to enter your topic. And then provide a button as generate. And then the type here is equal to submit. So with this one, let me log the response here to confirm if it is going to work as response. So let me come back here, reload, and if I say HTML, let me provide or log the error to see the actual response from the model. If I generate, as you can see, I have the modal to enter my API key. So let me locate my API key, which is API key, and then copy that back here. Let me enter and then save API key. Let me check where we have an error that says that onClose is not a function. So let me check where we have this error, and that is API key modal line number 16, which is line number 16, and that is onClose here. Well, it's supposed to be uppercase for C, and where we are calling the function or the model, it is onClose. It must match this one. So with this, let me reload. Well, I think it has been saved, so let me open the console where it has been saved. Let me try again. Reload and enter anything like HTML. It is asking for my API key. Provide, save, and then generate. Let me check the console. And we have Axios error that says that unknown field parameter message is not a valid. The issue is from the model name. It is not command R -- but instead is command R -08 2024. So with this, clear it and then generate. And we got the response from the model with a status code which is equal to 200. This means that the submit handler is working. So let's get the actual response, and it can be found on what is called response.data.text. If you check the response, on data, we have what is called .text, which is this one. And we are going to filter or trim these ones. Therefore, I'm going to assign this one to a variable which is equal to that. And let's go ahead and use split. We want to convert this text into array so that we can filter the keywords. So here are split, we're gonna split with comma, and then we're gonna use .map. At this point, this is going to be an array. So let me log the keyword here, and I'm gonna see them as an array. And take note about this. To avoid using our free plan credits, we are going to return only 2 keywords here at the moment. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to say that keywords for CSS and then generate. And as you can see, we got them as an array because of the split by comma. Therefore, we can loop through by using map and pass in the callback function, and we have access to individual keyword. And we're going to trim by using keyword.trim. And then lastly, we are going to filter out. So .filter, and we're gonna filter. Let's pass in the keyword here, and we are going to return the keyword. So if you log the keyword list, we're gonna have the actual keywords. So now we can update our state by using what is called set keywords. Below here, it goes like this: update keywords, and then it's equal to set keywords, and then pass in the keyword list. So now we can loop through the keywords here. So after the form, I'm going to say that loop through keywords, and it goes like this: curly braces, and then let's check in case you don't have any keywords, and that is .length. I'm using what is called optional chaining to avoid using AND operator. So this syntax is similar to this. In case we have keywords, then use keywords.length. And this is similar to this one. If it is more than 0, therefore I'm going to use AND operator. Then I'm going to have a div h3. I'm going to say that generated keywords. Then I'm going to loop through the keywords by using keywords.map. Then a callback function. We have access to the individual keyword and then the index. So in here, let me quickly return as that and use a div. And with a div, I'm going to have, and this is where I'm going to inject the keyword. Now this one, let's see, reload. And if I say CSS, and we have the result on the page, but it says that it should have a unique prop. So on the div, I'm going to use a key, and I'm going to use the index as the key. and it's gonna have a button to copy to clipboard, and we're gonna use an icon called FA copy from Font Awesome, which is this one. In case we have the keywords, then we're gonna use the icon as FA copy, and we're gonna have a function to copy to clipboard. At the moment, let's leave it as it is. Let's also provide some success message in case the copying was successful. So after the map, we are going to make a condition that in case copy success, we have it in a state, then we are going to show a p tag. I'm going to say that copy success. Then let me inject the copy success here. We will go ahead and implement the copying to clipboard. Let's finish up with the generating. At the moment, when we generate any keywords, we are not saving into Firestore. So let's implement that. And that is in the generate keywords here, which is this. As soon as we got the response and then update our state, we are going to save into DB. And this is how you're going to save. You're going to use await and then add document from Firestore. The auto import is fine, which is up here, add document for adding document into Firebase. And it goes like this. We're going to pass in the collection as a function call. We're going to pass in the DB configuration and then our collection name, which is equal to keywords. In case you were facing some challenges before implementing this, then you can comment out the use effect for getting the user history. So after you save, then you can uncomment it. So the next step is that we're going to pass in these configurations or the things that you want to save into DB. You're going to save the topic, comma, and then the keywords, which is equal to the keywords list, and then comma, user ID. We're gonna use user.uid, and then comma, the username, which is equal to the user.displayName. If we log the login user, we can find all these properties about the login user, and that is the ID and then the display name and also the profile picture. And lastly, we're going to use timestamp. In case you are using MongoDB, timestamp will be given to you automatically. But for Firebase, unless we add it by ourselves. Here, we're going to use new date. And lastly, we are going to empty the topic as set topic as empty, and in case something goes wrong, we are going to alert. So let me log the error here by saying that error generating keywords, and let me inject the error. And in case we have error dot response, let me use optional chaining dot status. If it is equal to 401, it means unauthorized. I'm going to say that alert invalid API key, and we're going to open the modal to allow the user to enter his or her API key, and I'm going to pass in true for this one. And let's use finally. After this, use finally. This is where we are going to set is loading to false, and this finally block is going to be called irrespective of the promised state. Now we can go ahead and generate the keywords and save into DB. I'm going to use Node.js for this and then generate. We're going to show some loading indicator when it is generating. And we got Node.js and SEO. If you check in our DB, and this is our project, and then click on the Firestore database, and we have the collection as keywords, and this is what we just saved into Firestore. Awesome, right? The next step is that we are going to fetch all the keywords and then display them accordingly. And we have already done that. If you check in the use effect, let me collapse this, and we have get the saved keywords, which is this one. And in here, we are filtering out all the queries that belongs to the login user. And this is where we are updating the state. So now we have access to the saved keywords in this variable called saved keywords. So if we log the saved keywords, let's check it out in the console, not this one. And we have it as an object with these values. So now we can display them accordingly. Below here, I'm going to show it before the keywords. It is up to you where you want to show the keywords. So I'm going to say that history section, and let me provide a wrapper as a div, and then h2, I'm going to say that history, and then we're going to look through. So first, we're going to check in case the saved keywords dot length is more than 0, then end operator, we are going to provide this div, and let's provide a button. Let me bring this one also here as that. Then let's provide a button, and for this button, when a user click on it, we are going to remove the history as delete, and we're gonna pass in an event handler called onClick, which is equal to clear history, and we will go ahead and then implement this function called clear history. Then below here, we are also going to check in case the saved keywords dot length, if it is equal to 0, then let me provide this div, and I'm gonna say that no keywords generated yet. Try generating some keywords above, and let me provide the tag as that. Else, we are going to loop through. So after this div, then bring else here, and I'm gonna use a div also to loop through it as div, and I'm gonna use the saved keywords dot map, and we have access to the individual item, and I'm going to return the JSX. Let me provide a div where I can pass in the ID as key, which is equal to item dot topic. Then provide h3. If you check in the DB, we have these properties as topic, user ID, username, and this is what we are accessing, and then the keywords here, which is an array. So the next step is that we are going to look through the keywords itself, and that is item.keywords. So inside here, we are going to take the item dot, let me use optional chaining, keywords dot map. And then for this, we have access to the individual keyword and then the index. Therefore, we are going to return a div and use a key which is equal to the index, and then let me use a span to inject the data as, and then a button to copy as button, and I'm gonna say that copy, we're gonna use an icon, and when a user click on this, we are going to call the copy-to-clipboard. At the moment, we don't have the function yet, but we will get there very soon as copy-to-clipboard, and then pass in the keyword that we want to copy. Alright, so let's have a look. Reload, and we have an error that says that clear history is not defined. So to make sure that it's going to work, let's remove this function, and then we have the data from the database as that. So let me bring back the copy to clipboard, and let's go ahead and implement that logic. Up here, I'm going to have a comment as clear history, and it goes like this: const clear history is equal to async, and we are going to do some batch deleting. But first, we're going to make a condition as if window.confer. Then I'm going to say that, are you sure you want to clear all the keyword history? Then we are going to use try and catch. And in the try, we are going to declare a variable called batch and assign to empty array. We are going to delete all the history at once. So here, batch is equal to empty array. Then we're going to take the saved keywords dot for each. And then callback function, we have access to the individual item. And in here, we're going to make a condition that if the login user is equal to the ID on the document, then we know that that document belongs to the login user. It goes like this: item.user ID. One more time, if you check in the DB, we have the user ID. We are going to match it against the login user. If it is equal to the user in the state.uid, we know that that document belongs to the login user. Therefore, we're going to take the batch and then push, then pass in what is called delete document, which is this, and that is from Firestore, which is delete document. Then I'm going to pass in what is called doc from Firestore, which is this one, and that is a document, which is the individual document. And then I'm going to pass in the DB configuration and then our collection name as keywords. And then item.id. And lastly, we are going to await promise.all. We want to make sure that all the operations are done and then pass in what is called a batch. And in case something goes wrong, we are going to log the error. With this one, when I reload and then delete, are you sure you want to delete? When I click on OK, as you can see, it has been deleted. Perfect. The next one is going to be the copy to clipboard. And in the keyword list, which is this one, not this, but instead this one, we have what is called copy to clipboard. Let's implement that logic as copy to clipboard. And to do that, I'm going to have a function as copy to clipboard async, and then try and catch block. In the try, we are going to await navigator, which is a built-in method in the browser. We have what is called clipboard and then dot write, and that is write text. And what are we writing? It is the text, which means upon calling this function, we are going to pass in the text. And then let's update the state as set copy success. Then I'm going to say copied. And let's remove the message as set timeout. And then the duration is 2 seconds, and that is 2000 milliseconds. And this is where we're going to set copy success to empty string. In case we have an error, set copy success, I'm going to say failed to copy. The next step is to implement the navigation, which is this one, and that is by showing the username and then the profile picture. And if you log the login user in the state, which is this, let me log it here, and we're gonna have the login user, which is this. On the off, we have the display name, email, and then the profile photo, which is this one. Therefore, we are going to make a condition that in case we have the login user, then you're going to show the nav bar. Let me place it here as nav, and it goes like this. Then end operator, I'm going to use JSX, and let's have the image as img. For the SRC, we can get the image or the profile photo on what is called user.photo URL, which is this from Firestore. And for the auth, I'm going to use the name as user.displayName. And let's have a span to inject the name as user.displayName, and let's check it out. And we have the login user, which is this one. And the next step is let's implement the logout. Have a button, and then when the user click on this, we are going to on click, we are going to call a function called handle signout. And let's implement this logic as handle signout, which is equal to const async, and we're going to use a method from the authentication configuration as bring in try and catch. In the try, we're going to await of.signout, and that is it. After that, we are going to navigate the user to /login, and in case something goes wrong, we are going to log the error. So let's try out. When I reload, I think I don't have the message on the button, which is this. I'm gonna say that logout, and I'm gonna use an icon for it, and we have it. If I click on that, as you can see, I have been redirected. If I try to go to dashboard, I cannot because I haven't logged in. But if I log in using a different account, and now I have my profile photo, which is this, and I can now generate new keywords. Alright guys, so here ends this project. I'm going to provide you with the complete code with the CSS, and the final source code will be provided. So I'm going to replace with these ones, and now we have something like this. Likewise, the modal, which is this, I'm going to replace with this one. And if I click on this, as you can see, the modal has been opened, and I can cancel. And let me generate for main stack. For this, let me change to 10 or 20 keywords, because I know that at this point I'm done. So back here for the generation, here, yeah, it is 10 instead, and let me generate. And here we go, we got the result. Now I can copy and I can clear the history.